Australia face Egypt under fresh injury pressure after losing 2 Socceroos. Can Australia survive that hit? Iran's coach is calling out the USA, Manchester United are waiting on Manuel Ugarte, and Reece James has England sweating. Tablo Sports starts with the Socceroos' injury blow before Egypt. The first headline goes straight to Australia's camp, because this is where the last 32 starts to feel brutal. Socceroos lose 2 injured players before Egypt knockout tie. The easy version is to call this bad luck, but knockout football does not care how unlucky you feel. What matters now is not sympathy for Australia, it is whether the reshuffle changes the way they can press, defend, and survive transitions against Egypt. This is exactly the kind of squad depth problem that looks manageable on paper and then becomes a tactical emergency after 20 minutes. Australia have had 2 injured Socceroos sent home from camp before their World Cup last 32 match against Egypt. That is the confirmed blow. The evidence supports the injury exits, but it does not verify club affiliations for those players, so we are not going to pretend we know details that are not in the reporting. Here is the important bit. They are not available for Egypt, and this comes after Australia qualified for the last 32 following a draw with Paraguay. Look, this is not just a medical update. Australia are heading into a knockout tie where every substitution can change the whole emotional temperature of the match. If the game becomes physical, if Egypt dragged them into long spells without the ball, if the bench is needed early, then those 2 missing bodies suddenly matter a lot more than they did in the group stage spreadsheet. Socceroos supporters are already debating whether the squad depth can survive another attritional game, and that is the right argument. Egypt are not just a badge on the bracket. They are a side with Mohamed Salah under a fitness watch, a coach trying to manage pressure, and a knockout place that gives the tie real edge. Australia have reached the stage everyone wanted, but they arrive with fewer options than planned. Elsewhere, the tournament is not only being decided by boots and hamstrings, Iran's coach has dragged FIFA and the US co-hosts into the middle of the story. Iran coach says USA treated team unfairly and urges Infantino to act. This is where football news becomes part match report, part political pressure campaign. The danger is treating the coach's comments as just noise, because they came while Iran's tournament fate was still tied to results and interpretations. At the same time, a complaint is not the same as FIFA action, and that distinction matters. Iran head coach Amir Galanoui said FIFA President Gianni Infantino must stand up to the US co-hosts after claiming Iran were treated very unfairly. The comments followed Iran's 1-1 draw with Egypt, a result that left Iran third in Group G in the evidence we have, with qualification still pending at that point. So let us be clear on this. The reporting we have says he made the accusation, not that FIFA has punished the US hosts. That detail matters because the story can easily get inflated into something bigger than the confirmed facts. Galanoui's frustration sits beside Iran's own football problem. They had chances, they drew 1-1, and online debate is split between criticism of tournament politics and focus on Iran's missed late opportunities. Coaches can be right about unfair treatment and still have to answer for the football on the pitch. The pressure now falls on FIFA's public posture. Infantino is being named directly, which turns a team complaint into a governance question. But until there is an official response or sanction, this remains a charged claim from Iran's coach at a decisive World Cup moment, not a completed disciplinary story. Meanwhile, Uruguay's exit came with another image that will worry supporters far beyond the national team. Manchester United wait on Manuel Ugarte injury after Uruguay stretcher blow. The most uncomfortable part of this story is that the result and the injury landed together. Uruguay are out, but Manuel Ugarte's stretcher exit means the consequences may travel back to Manchester United as well. Still, a stretcher is not a diagnosis, and guessing the injury would be cheap drama. Manchester United are waiting to learn the extent of Manuel Ugarte's injury after he was stretchered off during Uruguay's World Cup defeat by Spain. Uruguay lost 1-0, and that result sent them out of the tournament in the group stage. There is no need to dress it up. A group stage exit for Uruguay is already painful, and losing a key midfielder in that manner makes the night feel even heavier. Put it this way, when a player leaves on a stretcher, fans immediately start building worst-case scenarios in their heads. Manchester United fans will be doing that now, and Uruguay supporters will be doing it with the added sting of elimination. But the responsible line is simple. The extent of Ugarte's injury is not confirmed yet, and the reporting does not support a diagnosis. For Uruguay, the physical cost of the failed campaign is now part of the review. Spain's win ended their World Cup, and Ugarte's situation leaves a medical uncertainty hanging over the aftermath. For United, the waiting is the story, because until the medical update lands, nobody knows whether this is a scare or a long layoff. At the same time, England have their own selection problem, and this one hits a position where small details can shape an entire knockout route. Reece James's World Cup in doubt after England hamstring injury. Reece James is not just another name on an injury list, he changes how England can build attacks and protect wide spaces. The overreaction would be to declare his tournament over before confirmation, but the underreaction would be pretending a hamstring issue is minor noise. Thomas Tuchel now has to balance risk, rhythm, and the temptation to protect players before the bracket gets cruel. Sky Sports says Chelsea defender Reece James's World Cup is potentially over because of a hamstring problem. BBC reporting also says James is out injured while Declan Rice has returned to England training. That last detail matters because England's picture is not all bad, but the James concern is still a serious one before knockout football. So let us be clear on this is not the same as signed and announced tournament-ending confirmation, but the reporting we have says the doubt is real. England had already qualified for the last 32 before playing Panama, so the decision-making changes. Do you protect starters? Do you chase top spot? Do you use the final group match to build chemistry? Or do you avoid turning a manageable situation into another medical headache? England fans are debating exactly that, because every tournament eventually becomes a fight between momentum and self-preservation. James's value is not just reputation. For Chelsea, he is a player whose defending, delivery, and power down the right are central to how people judge his profile, and England lean on similar qualities when the game stretches. If he cannot play, Tuchel has to replace more than a shirt number. He has to replace a profile, and doing that without weakening England's route to the final is not a small coaching task. That is not the only major move today. While some contenders are limping into the last 32, Belgium have just sent a much louder message. Belgium thrashed New Zealand 5-1 to win Group G and reach knockouts. Belgium's 5-1 win is the sort of result that can trick people into saying the old machine is back, but the timing is still important. What matters more than the scoreline is that Belgium's attack clicked just as the tournament entered the stage where fear spreads quickly. New Zealand are out, and Belgium are no longer just surviving the group. Belgium beat New Zealand 5-1 in Vancouver to win Group G and reach the World Cup knockout stage. Leandro Trossard scored twice and New Zealand were sent out of the tournament. No soft phrasing needed here. Belgium did not scrape through. They won the group with a heavy scoreline and gave the bracket something to think about. Look, one big win does not erase every concern from earlier in the group. Tournament football loves a false dawn, and Belgium have had enough previous expectation loaded onto them to fill a small aircraft. But a 5-1 result before the knockouts is not nothing. It changes mood, it changes the opposition scouting meetings, and it gives Belgium fans a reason to reassess the ceiling after a slow start. The danger for Belgium is believing the performance solves everything. The danger for everyone else is dismissing it as just New Zealand collapsing. Trossard's 2 goals, the group win, and the timing of the surge all create the same message. Belgium have entered the knockout stage with sharper teeth than they showed at the start. Now to a story with longer-term impact, and honestly, one of the cleanest football stories in the whole tournament. Cape Verde make history with Saudi draw to set up Argentina tie. Cape Verde should not be reduced to a cute underdog postcard, because they earned a real knockout fixture. The expanded World Cup gets mocked easily, sometimes fairly, but this is the kind of moment the bigger format was built to create. Argentina are the giant next, and that is not a metaphor, that is the confirmed last 32 tie. Cape Verde have reached the World Cup round of 32 in their first appearance after a 0-0 draw with Saudi Arabia. They finished second in Group H, Saudi Arabia were knocked out, and Cape Verde advanced to face Argentina. For a country with a population of about 525,000, that is not just a nice storyline. It is historic football reality. Here's where the tone matters. Calling Cape Verde a miracle team can sound flattering, but it can also quietly erase the work. They did not wander into the last 32 because the tournament felt generous. They managed the group, got the result they needed against Saudi Arabia, and now they have a knockout match against Argentina. That is a bracket fact, not a motivational poster. Neutral fans are rallying around Cape Verde because the matchup has the perfect tournament charge, a debut nation against one of world football's biggest names. But the romantic version meets a brutal sporting question very quickly. Can Cape Verde defend space, survive pressure, and keep the game alive long enough to make Argentina uncomfortable? The situation is becoming more complex, because Australia's injury problems are only half of the story before that last 32 tie. Salah injury not serious, says Egypt coach before Australia tie. Mohamed Salah's fitness is the detail that can tilt the entire Australia-Egypt conversation. The important line is not panic. Egypt's coach says the injury is not serious. But not serious is not the same as fully sharp, and knockout opponents will test every hesitation. Egypt coach Hossam Hassan said Mohamed Salah's injury was not serious after the 1-1 draw with Iran, according to the reporting from Malay Mail. The Guardian also reports that Australia will meet Salah's Egypt in the last 32. So this is not a story saying Salah is ruled out. It is a story saying Egypt's biggest name is under an injury cloud, with his coach trying to cool the fear. That distinction matters. Liverpool fans will naturally watch every update because Salah is Salah, but the World Cup angle comes first here. Egypt have a knockout tie against Australia, and their ability to threaten in transition, hold attention from defenders, and punish one mistake changes dramatically if Salah is moving freely. For Australia, this is the uncomfortable scouting problem. You prepare as if Salah can play, because anything else would be reckless. For Egypt, the challenge is managing the public message without giving away too much. The coach says it is not serious, but the match will reveal whether Salah is simply available or truly dangerous. In another development tied directly to that Spain result, Uruguay's tournament review now points straight at Marcelo Bielsa. Bielsa accepts responsibility as Uruguay exit World Cup after Spain defeat. Bielsa accepting responsibility sounds noble, but it also sharpens the judgment of the project. Uruguay did not just lose a match, they left the World Cup in the group stage after a 1-0 defeat by Spain. The key is avoiding lazy drama. The evidence says his Uruguay reign is ending, but it does not frame it as a firing. Marcelo Bielsa said he was responsible for Uruguay's disappointment after their World Cup elimination with defeat by Spain. The final score was Spain 1-0 Uruguay, and that result ended Uruguay's tournament in the group stage. Bielsa also said he had left nothing to Uruguayan football, a stark line from a coach whose methods always invite fierce loyalty and fierce criticism. This is where the post-mortem gets messy. Bielsa teams can look thrilling when the press works, brave when the risks land, and strangely exposed when the whole thing bends the wrong way. Uruguay supporters are split between blaming the methods and blaming the player's execution. That split is not surprising, because Bielsa football rarely leaves people calmly in the middle. What we should not do is invent a replacement race or call this a firing without official confirmation. The confirmed story is strong enough. Uruguay are out, Bielsa has taken responsibility, and a high-profile World Cup campaign has ended earlier than many expected. That is a heavy enough verdict without adding fake certainty. Elsewhere in the bracket picture, England have already received the result they needed before even finishing the group. England qualify for last 32 before final group game against Panama. England qualifying early sounds comfortable, but comfort can be a trap in tournament football. The real question is not whether they are through, it is how Tuchel uses the Panama match without losing control of rhythm or fitness. Their exact last 32 opponent was still scenario-dependent in the supplied evidence, so pretending the route is settled would be nonsense. England's place in the World Cup knockout stage was confirmed by other results before their final group game against Panama. BBC framed the next issue as who England could face in the last 32, and the reporting says England's place was secured after Uruguay's exit against Spain. That gives Tuchel breathing room, but it does not give him a free afternoon. Look, this is where managers earn the money and then get blamed anyway. Rotate too much, and fans complain the team lost momentum. Go too strong, and one bad tackle turns the decision into a national trial. England fans are already debating rotation versus momentum, especially with Chelsea defender Reece James injured and Declan Rice back in training. Panama should not be treated as a dead rubber for both teams without the evidence saying that. England have qualified, yes, but the final group match still affects rhythm, selection, and potentially the knockout route. Tuchel now has to manage the strange pressure of a game that is less about survival and more about avoiding a self-inflicted problem. Finally, all of these stories feed into the same bigger picture. The bracket is no longer theory. World Cup 2026 bracket and knockout fixtures, who's facing who in the last 32, and route to final. The bracket is where narratives stop being cute and start becoming consequences. Injuries, group positions, and late results now decide who gets a manageable path and who walks straight into a heavyweight fight. The smart way to read the last 32 is not just who faces who, but who arrives with enough healthy players to play the match they want. Sky Sports is tracking the World Cup 2026 bracket and knockout fixtures, including who is facing who in the last 32 and the possible route to the final. That is the frame everything now sits inside. Australia against Egypt is confirmed. Cape Verde against Argentina is confirmed. Belgium are through as Group G winners. England are through, but their exact last 32 opponent was still scenario-dependent in the supplied evidence. This is the stage where tournament math becomes emotional. A draw with Paraguay helped Australia into the last 32, but now 2 injured players have gone home. Egypt reached the Australia tie with Salah under observation, even though Hassam Hassan says the injury is not serious. Cape Verde's 0-0 with Saudi Arabia made history, but the reward is Argentina, which is football's way of handing you flowers and then immediately asking you to fight a lion. So when fans stare at the bracket, the question is not only which side looks softer, it is which teams have usable depth, which coaches can adjust without losing identity, and which stars are fit enough to decide a knockout game. The route to the final is being drawn in fixtures, but it is also being shaped by stretchers, hamstrings, suspensions, and the kind of pressure that makes careful plans look very fragile. That is the World Cup picture for now. Australia wounded before Egypt, Salah not ruled out, England qualified but juggling risk, Belgium suddenly loud, Cape Verde making history, Iran pushing FIFA, and Uruguay leaving with questions that will not disappear quickly. Keep the receipt on every claim, because in this tournament, a headline can change in one scan, one press conference, or one bad sprint.